Okay, I think I've got all my ducks in a row at this point. Here we go. Music appreciation. So, when we talk about music, and music's history, we first need to know about how to discuss music properly. Excuse me. We begin with the 3 ways of listening to music. The first way, probably very familiar with, it's called listening in the background. This is music that you are not in control of. It's subconscious, it's present, but you don't really have a say in the matter. So this might be, you go to like a grocery store and they have music playing in the background, or you're watching television, movie, and there's music in the background and you don't really notice it, but it's there. And again, you don't have control of that. Then, second way listening to music is on an emotional level. When we listen to music emotionally, this is where we are, in fact, in charge of what we hear, usually to complement how we are feeling. So you're probably very familiar with this too. If you do, in fact, listen to music ever, you have probably done it either of these ways. So here you are in control, and this is usually to complement current feelings or contradict current feelings. Like maybe you're having a terrible day and you want to feel better, and you use music to do that. Good on you. But the third way that we listen to music, this is our primary focus of the semester, is to musically listen to music. And what does this mean? Well, this is not about how music makes us feel. It is not about its presence. It is about being able to understand and describe what you hear. How do we do that is an interesting question. Well, here's the crash course. We must describe what we hear using the 7 pillars of music, or 7 building blocks, and we call them elements of music. So I'm going to move this little box, maybe. This box, that box. Select, that's how we do it. And I'm going to continue a discussion over yonder. What is Professor Jake talking about with elements of music? There are 7 of them. I should put the number 7 over here. These are all of the puzzle pieces that make up everything we know to be true in music. The first element of music is an idea that we call rhythm. Rhythm, as a basic structure, really just defines itself as duration of sounds. So short, long, somewhere in the middle. You need other durations of sound to show comparison of, was that short or long? So is my piano working? I can hear it. Hopefully you can too. That sound that I just played, was it short? Was it long? We don't really know without some form of comparison. If we took that sound and maybe broke it up into shorter sounds, we could say that the first sound that I played for you was a long one, and the next 4 that I played for you were significantly shorter. there needs to be a little more organization than long and short, a unit of measurement of sorts. Like think of this as maybe inches on a ruler, or if we were using the metric system, some sort of breakdown of meter. What do they do? Decameter, centimeter, things like that. So the equivalent of a unit of measurement in music that gives us a visual reference is an idea that we call a beat. And a lot of us have probably used the word beat to describe sounds that we hear in music, really associated perhaps with like drums, percussion instruments. And for our purposes, that is not going to fly. We don't use the word beat to describe percussion. Percussion gets a broad stroke of groove or pattern, be another word. But saying like, oh, this music's got a sick beat, that really doesn't tell us anything, as when we are talking about musically listening to music, that we really need this word to have a unit of measurement pertaining to rhythm, shorts and longs. So what is a beat? A beat is a consistent pulse in the music. Hopefully you have not lost your visual completely there. So I get my notes back in order here. Okay. So you could think of a beat in music as, oh, damn it. Oops, wasn't supposed to curse. Have to censor that out. Okay. Beat is music's pulse. Like inches on a ruler, it's consistent units of measurement. So if we heard a beat that existed in music, let me play you just some literal beats, what they may sound like. Of music. All right. Hopefully that gives you some insight into what a beat is. We hear them kind of sounding over and over and over again. We can group those beats like inches inside of a foot into a larger unit of measurement. That larger unit of measurement is called a meter. The meter in music is just a grouping of beats. Usually these occur in groups of 2s, 3s, and 4s, though other combinations can exist. And it's just the term that we use. There are other synonyms for the word meter that I will occasionally use. We see the word measure, and we may see the word bar. Any of these would be good descriptors for groupings of beats, and they usually happen again in patterns of 2s, 3s, or 4s. And I'll get a little bit more into that shortly, but for now, just know that groupings of beats are defined by slight little emphases, multiple emphases, every alteration of these numbered beats. So, for example, a 2-beat meter would kind of sound or feel like this, where you have 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 on infinite loop for the duration of your musical performance. Then threes be like this: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm emphasizing the 1 and then following it with even distributions of the other 2 counts. And then, of course, 4 would be the same: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're probably very familiar with the 4-beat grouping, as most pop music for the last 100 years has mostly maintained a 4-beat meter. Very seldom do we see anything that isn't a 4-beat meter exist, at least in pop culture. That surely does, in fact, exist and continue to get created. If you are a dancer and you have enjoyed, say, maybe going ballroom or Cajun dancing, you can, or Zydeco dancing, you may have encountered a 3-beat meter. The music would pair with the dance that's the waltz, and you'd have 1, 2, 3, left, right, left, right, left, right would be your dance steps to go with that particular meter. And 2-beat meter is kind of tricky because it's often divided, and 4-beat meter can kind of trick you and make you think it's a 2-beat meter because of math. But a 2-beat meter is usually reserved for marching music. So you'd have things that literally pair with your feet, just like dancing to the waltz. And you'd have left, right, left, right, left, right, marching band going down the street. It's probably playing in a 2-beat meter, correlating with their feet. Okay, now there's one final puzzle piece that fits under this first category of an element of music, and this is a fun one. It's called syncopation. What on earth is this word? The short version is it's any sound that is not in sync with the beat. So these groupings of meters, groupings of beats classified as meters. If you had sound occur within those 4 beats or 3 beats or 2 beats, if the music did not contain an idea that we would call syncopation, you would have sound that is directly in line with each of those beats, be non-syncopated music, meaning everything is in sync. And if I played some little example for you, where'd my pedal go? Kicked it. There we go. So let me put my clicker back on here for you to hear. Clicker now. Every sound that you heard was directly in sync with the beat, excluding the last little bump at the end. That, of course, the musical example was written by Ludwig van Beethoven, who I will teach you about at a later point in time. It's the finale from his 9th Symphony, which we have turned into a popular hymn tune. If you're a churchgoer, a lot of people know it as the Ode to Joy. Back from Jeopardy trivia, back into syncopation. That was probably not super exciting for you to hear those sounds because there was no syncopation in any of that. It sounded very church hymny. No syncopation, nothing making you excited about, say, wanting to dance. Syncopation is the thing that makes you want to, in fact, dance. When you add sounds in between those beats, it makes everything very, very exciting. So give you, say, an extremist opposite end of the spectrum example. Tempo. I wanted to do that faster, but I should have adjusted the clicking speed. Anyway, lots and lots of sounds in between the beats. Very different from the church example, or the Beethoven example. All right, these are the ideas that are all encompassed underneath the idea of rhythm. We have short and longness of sound, beats, which would be consistent, same durations of sound, groupings of those beats, and then displacement of sound against those grouped beats. Hopefully, all of this makes sense for the first element of music. Let's knock out the next one here. Tempo. Tempo in music is pretty straight ahead. It literally refers to the speed of the beat. There are a couple bonus things that we do here when we talk about the speed of the beat. We track it in a unit of measurement called beats per minute using a device called a metronome. Let's see if I can spread that out. There we go. OCD brain having a better time here. So beats per minute, like you take your pulse, you go to the doctor, you're working out, you want to know how many beats per minute your heart rate is at. It's the same unit of measurement, how many beats occur over the course of a minute. Metronome used to be this like little triangular device with a pendulum that would swing back and forth, but since then we've made most everything digital. The increased number of beats per minute versus decreased number of beats per minute produces faster and slower speeds or tempos overall. So if I pull up the click speed that we heard prior to this, where I just played a little ragtime and Beethoven for you, that was at 120 beats per minute. If we increase that speed to 180 beats per minute, we could also decrease it numerically. Multiples of 60 are always good. 60 beats per minute. One beat per second would be that, or 60 beats per minute. So speed of beats. A lot of times in the titles of songs that we will be encountering or musical examples, you will see Italian words that are descriptors or literally just the titles of what you're about to hear. Like there's a famous piece of music from the 20th century called Adagio for strings. What is Adagio? Adagio means slowly in Italian. So there's the piece of music is literally translated to slowly for stringed instruments. Very, very boring title. So you'll see a lot of Italian terminology. I think I spelled that correctly. See words like adagio, which means slowly. See other words like vivace, which means lively. Word presto is fast. Andante is usually like a medium speed, medium slowish. medium slash medium slow, something like that. They will occur in titles throughout the textbook, musical examples. People that wrote music for a while didn't really give things very intricate names. Specifically, instrumental music got a lot of titling just from the speed in which the music was supposed to be performed. So that is tempo in a nutshell. Then we shall move over to the next element of music, which is called dynamics. So 3 elements of music so far. We have rhythm, which is duration, tempo, which is speed. Dynamics is the academic or musical term for volume, louds and softs. We typically, in America, use, at least in music, loud and soft. We usually don't say high or low for volume description in music. Encountered a lot of young piano Padawans that use the word low incorrectly, and it bugs me because I have to teach you this. I want them to understand too. We use loud and soft, but a lot of music's history is based in Europe, and the Italians kind of had a large monopoly on terminology. So we see this word, forte, as it's pronounced for loud, and this one for soft, piano, the instrument that I'm playing in front of you. A long time ago, the piano, when it was invented, was the forte piano, which was Italian for the loud soft. It's one of the first instruments that could play, first keyboard instruments that had some sort of volume sensitivity. Did I call it the forte piano? I think I meant piano forte. Backwards. All right, anyway, there are different levels of sound that get used. If you want to incorporate the word medium to any of this, you add the word mezzo, spelt like this. Mezzo, 2 Z's like pizza, gets that T sound. So if you wanted to say, oh, medium soft, it would be mezzo piano, or medium loud would be mezzo forte. So now we have 4 levels of sound, but there are 6 overall. And if you want to add very, then you add to the end the suffix issimo. So you would say very loud would be fortissimo, or very soft would be pianissimo. And those are the 6 volumes that exist in music. Of course, there are extreme ends to the spectrum of like fortissimo, which is very, very loud, or pianissimo, which would be very, very soft. And then we also mark changes in sounds, gradual changes or very sudden changes from loud to soft. Changes in volume could be executed with these 2 ideas. Sudden changes would get this Italian word, subito, suddenly. And then if we had a more gradual change in sound, where'd my little cursor thing go? Here we go. More gradual change. If it gets louder, you would call the idea a crescendo, or if it happened multiple times, crescendi. If it got softer, you'd say it was a crescendo. Sometimes a diminuendo. I don't think I spelled endo. Diminuendo. Sound it out. Looks right. Okay. So one is gradually getting louder, and the other 2 with the slash are multiple synonyms that would work for gradual changing to softer. And let's see, element number 4 is what? Melody. Melody and the next element of music that we're going to talk about, which is harmony, go hand in hand because they both are concerned with an idea that we call pitch or frequencies. They're both going to get this. I guess we're going to talk about both of them simultaneously. So melodies contain pitches and frequencies. And what does that mean? Quick physics thing is you have sound waves that exist in the course of time and space. They vibrate a certain number of times per second. For example, I believe this is vibrating at 440 vibrations per second. Not visible to the human eye. If you look at like strings on a guitar when they get plucked, they continue to vibrate. The thinner the strings, the higher the pitch or frequency that gets produced, the harder it is to see because the number associated with that also increases. The lower you go, thicker strings produce lower pitches, which when I was talking about volume with high and low, this is where we use the words high and low, is when we talk about pitches. So we have low pitches and high pitches, and by comparison, pitches in the middle. But more scientifically, we can use numbers to grab these different pitches. So for going back to that example of 440 vibrations per second, this produces a pitch. If you double that particular number and say, I want 880 vibrations per second, you get what sounds just like the same note, but it's higher. There are in Western music or European music tradition, 12 different sounds that we hear before we get to that doubling of a number of the first sound. We can give each of these things names. In fact, we have for over 1,000 years. We have given them either letter names or syllable names, depending on where you hail from. In America, we refer to the 7 of those 12 sounds using the first 7 letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. The other 5 are a little ambiguous. They get names that are usually preceded with the descriptor of flat or sharp. When it comes to melody, we are aligning these pitches one at a time. So A, B, C, D, E, F, or G preceded by the word flat or sharp, or just left alone alphabetically, you get one sound at a time. Makes what we call a melody. Here is a beloved little melody. That's it. That is a melody. As opposed to harmony, which is better described as simultaneous sounds. Usually end up calling, chords or multiple melodies simultaneously. Gets a couple different vocabulary words there. For melodies, really straight ahead, it's usually the part that you sing along with when you listen to a song, but it could be any individual instrument's part specifically an instrument that can only play one sound at a time. For example, oh, I don't have it out. Might bust out next time a trumpet for you. Uh, Trumpets can only produce one sound at a time. So whatever a trumpet ends up playing could be considered a melody. Piano, that I have in front of me, can in fact play melody, but it can also play next element of music, harmony. Harmony, two sounds or more at the same time. Harmony, also harmony. Beautiful, beautiful harmony. There exists the idea of consonance and dissonance, just like duration.
Talking about multiple levels of harmony choices and melody choices. My descriptor of monophonic harmony is when you have like a male and female vocalist that are singing the same notes, but physically, because of their bodies, they have produced different highness and lowness of that same note. If that is happening, and that is the only thing that you're hearing, say it's like a cappella, no instruments, then that would be monophonic. Or if you had, say, like a trumpet and a saxophone playing the same melody at the same exact time, that would also be considered monophonic. As opposed to homophonic, which is a main melody produced by one or multiple individuals, but it is accompanied by simple harmonic support, meaning like basic chords. If you think of a guitarist that strums a chord and then sings something, that would be a good example of some basic homophonic music. Or if you had a bunch of folks in an a cappella setting, maybe sustaining what we might call a musical drone. You just have one long vowel sound, ah or ooh, and then somebody sings over the top of that. Be another example of homophony, as we'd call that word. And then there is the most interesting, exciting one, polyphonic music, which is contrasting melodies coexisting at the same time. Now, sometimes this could sound really cool, and other times it could sound pretty terrible. But most of the time, if you're listening to pop music, you are actually listening to this idea, this concept of polyphonic music. Let me stay consistent. Multiple melodies sounding together simultaneously. So short version example is you have a singer, lead singer of a band, and you have a bass player. They are playing two totally different parts from each other. Or one is singing a contrasting melody that is not the exact same thing as whatever the bass player is doing. That is polyphonic music in a nutshell. Polyphonic music can encompass both monophonic and homophonic concepts, but the end result is going to be all these multiple melodies that kick off simultaneously. What else do I need to tell you about harmony? Harmony also lets us understand the phrases in music. Melody can also do this, but phrases are usually marked by musical punctuation. Again, melodies can do this too. Kind of we're tackling both of these things simultaneously. like that word at the same time. There are ideas that are, I don't know, did I spell that right? I did spell that right. Cadences are, there's like three that we're going to hear a whole bunch of over the semester. One is considered to be a more of a period, a final thought. The other is more of a question mark, meaning that our ears want to hear a little bit more of an answer, or actually a lot more of a musical answer to the end of that phrase. And then the third is an idea that we call maybe more of like a semicolon, or like the sentence could kind of be done, but it would be nice to have a little more explanation following it. And that third one is specifically produced by the melody sounding like it's been a complete thought, but the harmony being messed with and leaving you not feeling very satisfied. Whenever I get a piano back up and running, I can play these examples for you, because of course these concepts are rather dry without any sort of explanation. Anyway, these are the ideas that are all encompassed under the fifth element of music, called harmony. 6, told you we're almost there, is timbre. Looks like timbre, yes, but timbre is a word that describes musical texture. What's the other word that sometimes gets used here? Your book uses it, but I don't often. Basically, this is the ingredients that come together, ingredients or instruments that all come together to produce the end result that is the music that you're listening to. We categorize instruments into families. There is a vocal instrumental family, which kind of sets the tone for how all the other instruments will work. We have the highest sounding voices that are associated with females. Generally speaking, that is soprano, or you could be a low-voiced female voice, which is called an alto. You could be a high-voiced man or male, that would be called tenor, or you could be a low voice man, which is called bass, occasionally baritone. But we have high, medium low, and low as our general descriptors for voice types that can come together as part of our musical instrumentation. Because we think of the voice as an instrument. There's another instrument called the string family. This is any instrument that you touch the strings directly with your hands to produce the sounds. So I just pantomimed guitar or banjo or mandolin. Any of these would fit the bill. But more so in the music that we will be encountering over music history, we have the highest of the stringed instruments with a bow, which I typoed, violin, or fiddle, some people call it. It is the equivalent of a soprano in music. There's the alto equivalent, which is called a viola. It's a slightly larger violin, produces some lower frequencies. Then there's a large standing instrument with a bow that you call a cello. And then the largest of the bowed instruments would be called a double bass or an upright bass. And these are the main instruments in the stringed instrument family. Part of your additional homework beyond the chapter quizzes, if you are unfamiliar with any of these concepts that I am putting forth out unto you here, you're going to need to go on YouTube or somewhere, YouTube, Google, 3 people in the world that use Bing, and go find what these instruments, one, look like, be very helpful, but two, what do they sound like? And if you literally just type in instrument viola, then you will probably see some video pop up that's, what is a viola? Or Viola 101, something like that, and someone will show it to you and play it. The video is probably way longer than it needs to be, but you will suddenly have a new understanding of what that instrument is. So that'll go for any of these instruments that I'm giving you right now. Next up, next family is the woodwind family. Some fun stuff in here. These are instruments that at some point in time contained wood or currently still contain wood and require air or wind to produce their sound. Flutes, piccolos, oboes. What's an oboe? Go look it up. Clarinets, bassoon. What's a bassoon? Go look it up. And saxophone are the main woodwind instruments. Bagpipes, harmonica, ocarina even could be considered woodwind instruments. These are the ones that we'll hear the most during the semester. I am seeing that I'm starting to run out of room in this little thing. Almost there. Brass instruments are next, made entirely out of metal, and the air that is required to produce sound with brass instruments touches the metal directly, which is why a saxophone is part of the woodwind family. They have a wooden reed that is part of the tone production. So brass instruments, trumpets, French horn, trombone, tuba, other variances in these like euphonium, slide trumpet, not so common, but they do in fact exist. Looks like I'm gonna have to jump over to this side. Hopefully that's been there long enough for people to understand what that was about. And we're going to talk about the next instrument family. Put a little marker, instrument families continued. After brass exists percussion. This is fun. Anything that your hands smack can be called a percussion instrument. A lot of times we see the use of sticks or mallets to help create the sound, but sound can be directly produced through your hands. So this would be any sort of drum, which would include snare drums, bass drums, timpani. What else would work in here? Any sort of metallic cymbals, which can be open and closed together as hi-hats, as crash cymbals, as spang-spang-a-lang, as ride cymbals in jazz setting. The little psh, the end of Dixieland stuff, that's a splash cymbal, little tiny cymbal. What other things? Ooh, mallet percussion, like marimbas, xylophones, glockenspiel. What are those words? Let me type out some of those so you can go look up what that is. Marimba, xylophone, glockenspiel, chimes. Those things, those are fun, very colorful, decorative, embellishing, percussive instruments. Your hands can be an instrument. You can clap, and that, if you do it the right way, could be an instrument in itself. Your desk or wherever you're sitting, maybe your laptop, your phone, whatever, if you hit it, it could be a percussion instrument. Then there's the debacle of where do keyboard instruments lie? Because a lot of mallet percussion, like marimbas, xylophones, vibraphones, they all kind of look like a piano keyboard. You just hit them with sticks, but you could hit them with your hands. So are they a keyboard instrument? Are they a percussion instrument? They are, in fact, percussion instruments, and all the keyboard instruments, because you hit the keys with your hands, unless it's an organ, you can play it with your feet. They all get dubbed percussion instruments. So all keyboard instruments, pianos, organs, harpsichord. Ooh, what is a harpsichord? Another one to go look up. We're going to hear a lot of that in the Baroque era talk. All right. Any other instruments that we need to talk about? That's a good introduction to instruments that are mostly located in an orchestra, which is, we're going to listen to a lot of orchestral music over the course of the semester. When we talk about this particular element of music, which is back over here, timbre or texture, this is combinations of these sounds or just individual identifications of these sounds. So if you're listening to music and you talk about, I hear flutes, then you are identifying one of the 7 elements of music. You are identifying a singular timbre in your music. Our goal when we musically listen to music, which I deleted the box about the ways that we listen to music, is to identify as many of these 7 elements of music as possible as you listen, so that we can better describe what we hear. Okay, last element of music is an idea called form. So if we've taken all these other concepts and kind of broken them apart and say all these things make up music and they all get funneled into this general descriptor type. Form is the order of musical events. More so on a larger scale, where all of these things can happen. If you are an avid listener of music that has a singer in it, you are probably fairly familiar with music that earns a title called verse chorus, which you have a section of music that's got a lot of poetry. And it doesn't really repeat itself. It tells a very long story. Then it is followed by a section that does not contain a lot of poetry. It may not contain tangible words at all. Perhaps oohs and ahs only is this main repetitive little chunk that keeps returning over and over and over again. You would be experiencing something that we call verse chorus based music. There are other terms that come into play when we think of verses and choruses, and when we are in a timeline that is the song, such as like bridge, introduction, verse 2, chorus number 2, outro, tagged ending. All these things are kind of encompassed under this headline of verse and chorus. But this can become problematic if you're trying to use verses and choruses and bridges and intros and things when you are trying to decipher when you are in the timeline of music that contains no lyrics whatsoever. What must you do? How does one describe what section of the music they are in if there are no words to tell us that this is definitely the verse or this is definitely the chorus? The answer is to use letters. So if we had some instrumental chunk of music happen, and we can take some notes about what we're hearing and say, oh, it's loud, there's a trumpet, it is playing a melody that is maybe fairly angular, has a lot of jumps in it. Say, let's call that the letter A. It's the first thing that we hear. Sure, let's call it that. Then, suddenly, the music takes a dramatic turn, and it sounds like a totally different section. The melody has become more linear, less angular. A new instrument, a new timbre has taken over the role of the melody. Maybe it's I don't know, an organ. Ooh, fun. And what else changes? It's a little softer now. I'm trying to identify a series of a series of differences. We'd call it the letter B. And you just say, oh, okay, it went from A to something different to B. And when you're trying to tell people about all those ideas that I just listed, what you heard, you'd say, oh, during the B section, I liked how it changed from the new instrument that was the melody was the organ. You've just nailed a bunch of different elements of music in your descriptor of what you're trying to say versus the concept that we talked earliest about with how we listen to music, which is I like it and I don't like it because it makes me feel good or it does not make me feel good. That definition is quite lame, but if you go in here and you could say I like it because X, Y, and Z, you are on your way to sounding like you know something, which is awesome. So we use letters, and each new letter in this sequence would kind of describe changes. But a lot of music, like we said in verses and choruses, can kind of return. Like you could have a verse and then a chorus and then another verse. Well, if that happened in instrumental music with no words and we were calling the verse A and the chorus B, and then we went back to another verse, we would call it A. If we went after that to what might be something new that we have not heard, like a bridge, we call it C. As long as there are marked differences, you can use these letters as means of your theoretical argument of where you are, or when you are rather, in the timeline of the music that you're hearing. Tips and tricks to help you better familiarize yourself and dive inside of the music that we're going to make you listen to so it doesn't feel so foreign. One, you got to try and listen to it like in the olden days, in which multitasking was not a thing. So, well, I mean, multitasking was a thing, but when we talk about like how you experience music prior to 1979/1980, music and video didn't really go together. Prior to like when did the first records for mass consumption really come out? Well, I guess 1890. The idea of being able to play recorded music and listen to it in the background while you were doing something else didn't really exist either. If you experience music, like you're there to listen to it and critically think on it, and occasionally be moved by it within that critical thinking. Like you can experience multiple levels of this listening as you go. But to truly get what we're talking about here and trying to understand the differences between, say, Johann Sebastian Bach and Beethoven and Aaron Copland, names, maybe only knew one of those names, maybe two. If you're trying to understand the differences in instrumental music, you got to really be in it and paying attention. So step one is like eliminate all distractions. Step two, it's okay to move to the music. It's how our bodies really, really feel the music, and we get inside of this thing that you can't touch. The closest we get is like picking up a CD or the age of streaming. I'm going to touch my computer. It's the closest you get to the sound, unless you make it yourself. But music's like intangible like that. Anyway, clap your hands, tap your feet, move your body to the music as you feel it. If you claim the music does not have a beat, you are incorrect. You are going back to there are no drums that are grooving or producing a pattern in your music. All music contains a recurring pulse. Otherwise, it would be dead. So you can find something to tap your foot to, move your hands to, snap your fingers. In fact, one of the things that you could do with your hands, you may have seen an orchestra at some point, whether it was like in a movie or in real life. There was a dude up in front of the orchestra, and he flapped his arms up and down with the music. What he's doing is very intentional. It's not just made up flapping of arms. It's called conducting. That dude is called the conductor, or dudette that happens to be up there flapping their arms. They're the conductor. And the short version of how stuff works is that, back to our idea of meter and beats, is that they pump their arms to the beats. I'm going to get rid of the whiteboard screen for 2 seconds so you can see a larger version of me.